Alright, welcome back to We Play Games. I'm Walker, and here we are about to begin our Advanced Country Guide series with Afghanistan, and now we're looking at arable land in the open beta for 1.2. I want to do this video with a big caveat. There's a good chance that some of these numbers actually end up changing. I personally hope that they do, due to the nature of these numbers. But we'll see. But they do have a pretty big impact on the nature of the economies that you can build and support in Victoria 3. And so I think you do need to be aware of that. That's why we're making this an Academy video. In 1.2, somebody here on the subreddit has gone through and actually done the math. But in 1.2, in the current build, there's a massive redistribution of arable land. There's a huge increase of arable land in North America and South America, and a pretty meaningful decrease in East Asia, India, Indonesia, Australasia, and they fixed this up by giving some of these parts of the world a special subsistence building, the subsistence rice paddies. But this arable land rework has some pretty significant impacts in regards to the way the societies that live here work. So you'd assume here as Afghanistan, because we have access to opium, that maybe we should lean into creating a rural economy, one that's optimized around opium creation and exports. But unfortunately for Afghanistan, they really don't have the arable land necessary to make that operate. How do I know that? How do I know that 94 is just not going to be enough? It's because of the way economies of scale work. So here in Victoria 3, every building at the end of the game, you really want to be able to build up to size 51, because that's going to maximize your throughput bonus. Every size past the first is going to give you a 1% bonus to throughput, which is going to increase the demand for inputs, but also increase the demand of outputs. And generally speaking, that sort of increased economic activity per construction point spent is just good across the board, but also useful for making these people, the people who work in those buildings, richer. And so what you want to do in Victoria 3 is you want to try to specialize your economy around the things that your economy can be specialized in. One of the things that our economies should be able to be specialized in, I think, in Afghanistan is opium. But unfortunately for us, we only have 94 arable land here, so we can capture an incredibly small amount of construction in our opium plantations. What do I mean by capturing construction? What are we talking about? Any sort of economy that's being built up in Victoria 3 is going to have to do a couple of things. First, you're going to have to feed your beast. So you need to get your construction sector up and going. It does need to be scaled to the size of the economy. Sometimes you get it up and going by literally building one size in your capital. But you do want to get it up and going, and you want to get it growing as you grow your economy. Right? As you conquer more territory, as you puppet more people, as you grow your GDP, you'll add in more construction, and that'll allow you to build even faster, and that'll build away your peasants, and it'll utilize your money productively. But you do need somewhere for your construction points to go. And in urban buildings, the only finite thing there is infrastructure and POPs. There is sort of a limit to how big you can build your urban buildings, because there is a carrying capacity for each state in Victoria 3 that's going to be defined by arable land. Right now in Victoria 3, you got 100,000 carrying capacity for each point of arable land in the state. So Western Afghanistan here, it has 94 plus 3 plus 3. And so the maximum population here in Western Afghanistan is 10 million. Now that's 10 million, including peasants, unemployed, dependents, etc. And so it's a smaller employed population than you'd think, but it's still a really, really, really big population, right? And what it means is that in order to give all of those 10 million people jobs, we can't just do resource extraction, because resource extraction is heavily capped with a maximum amount in that state. But one of the capped resources here, whether we know it or not, is unused arable land. Because you can't just build as much agriculture as you want. You can only build, first of all, the buildings that are actually available in each state, which is something that I do think that this post misses, is that not all arable land was made the same. If your arable land can grow silk and dyes and cotton and opium, it's generally going to be a lot more useful than if it can only grow wheat. But generally speaking, there are some that are like a lot worse. Like tea and coffee are pretty miserable because they don't go into anything industrially. You can't increase the productivity of the agricultural building of the coffee plantation by doing anything other than either A, reducing the cost of wages, or B, once you have pump jacks online, keeping the cost of motors down. But with dyes, for instance, if you want to make your dye plantations more productive, you build a textile mill. That'll increase demand for the dye, which will increase the money going to the dye plantations, and therefore the money going to the people working on the dye plantations, and therefore the political power of the people working on the dye plantations. In Victoria 3, a lot of the mechanics are interconnected, and so if you want to build an agrarian economy, you do need a way to not only create an agrarian economy, but sustain an agrarian economy, a way to capture construction points in something that's economically useful to the people who are demanding an agrarian economy. And in this case, unfortunately, with the current distribution of arable land, you kind of can't as Afghanistan. So here we have 94 points of arable land that's not being used. What that means is 94 buildings. Each of these agricultural buildings is going to be 150 construction points. So that's 14,100 construction points total that we can spend on the arable land here to upgrade these people to give them better jobs. In terms of capturing construction points, that's not very efficient, because you should know that some of these urban buildings, chemical plants for instance, they cost 450 construction points. And so you're capturing the same amount of construction points as only a level 32 chemical plant if we were to build out this entire agricultural industry here. Yes, that's very inexpensive in terms of getting people away from peasantry, but it's really inefficient in terms of the absolute maximum carrying capacity of these states. And what that means is that if you want to make an agrarian economy work in 1.2, specifically if you want to make an economic system agrarian economy, or potentially cooperative ownership, then you need to be responsive to how much arable land you have. And in this case, I don't think that most states have mechanically enough. I don't know about how accurate it is in regards to the world distribution of arable land, but it seems like mechanically there's just not enough arable land here, because you can't grow a particularly large economy as Afghanistan building opium plantations right now. It's not hard to see how the way that Western Afghanistan and Eastern Afghanistan is going to have to build away all of these peasants, at least in the 1.2 first branch, it's going to have to be utilizing logging camps and maybe some cotton plantations and iron mines and tools, and lean away from the agricultural buildings, simply because there's just not enough opportunity for growth here. Because that's sort of the most important thing, is that you want to make sure that your laws and the government that sponsors those laws is in turn supported by the economy that you build. We'll discuss this in a separate video, but I think one of the problems that people are encountering in regards to their legitimacy is that they're trying to push through changes in ways that aren't supported by their society and aren't supportable by their society, right? Like here in Afghanistan, in 1836, we have 0.4% clout for our industrialists. It's literally a waste of 200 authority for me to go in here and bolster them right now, because there's just not enough pops who meet the profession requirement in order for the industrialists to be powerful. What that means is that after having built up a construction economy as Afghanistan, because that is generally speaking going to be the strongest for most countries, it means that my money isn't going to be seeking profits by building out rural buildings. There's also an extremely finite cap in regards to where our agrarian investment pool can actually spend itself. So I think that the way that Paradox should handle this is A, they should reduce the carrying capacity for each point of arable land. I think 10,000 is fine. And then just give everybody 5 to 10 times more arable land total. So that way you can support just a much bigger agrarian economy as most of these countries. Because otherwise, there's just not really a reason to specialize here. If we absolutely specialized in opium plantations here in Afghanistan and built 94 more levels and maxed it out, so on maximum methods of production for publicly traded for opium plantations, if we had rail transportation on and automatic irrigation on and publicly traded on, then we have 3,950 total maximum employment here. which means that we could support 371,000 people working on opium plantations in Western Afghanistan. But keep in mind that they will have some dependents, so we'll just round that up. We'll say that's like maybe 1 million. What that should tell you is that Western Afghanistan here, in regards to its total size of an agricultural economy, is extremely limited, right? We could have 10 million people working here if we were working in urban buildings, but we can have maybe 1 million people living here if we're working in agricultural buildings. And so I think that there really does need to be a massive increase in the amount of arable land in the game, but we'll see. That might be something that comes in 1.2. It is an open beta right now, and they're making lots of adjustments as things go along. There's also some small spillover effects in regards to where the arable land has been removed. So not all arable land is made the same. You need to think about it sort of in the same way as a resource deposit. Every state has very specific agricultural buildings that it can build. And so dye plantations, silk plantations, sugar plantations, those are all just generally a lot stronger. And they're also, generally speaking, distributed in the states that have lost the most in terms of their total arable land in the current build for 1.2. So what that means is, although agrarianism is a little bit stronger and cooperative ownership does look interesting, I do think that any sort of rural playstyle is going to be extremely narrow until they dramatically increase the amount of arable land in the game. Maybe you could make it work as like Mexico or the United States, possibly as Russia or Great Qing, but there's just an extremely finite amount of arable land in most of these countries, which means that there's an extremely finite amount of agricultural economic activity that can occur there. One final note that I do want to highlight is that if you want to make an agrarian economy work in patch 1.2, at least with the current distribution of arable land, then you want to make sure that you have some unincorporated states where you have built up your industrial base, because that's going to create a demand for the goods, either because it's an industrial demand, like using opium in your field hospitals, or using cotton plantations in your textile mills. But either way, you're creating something where the building outside of your incorporated states creates money for people living inside of it. Because that's a way to create a wealth transfer, but it's also simply a way to create more political power for the pops who are living there. And that's going to be really critical. I think that the most important thing that you need to keep in mind in regards to patch 1.1 and 1.2 is that you can have a lot of legitimacy, but you need to play the game carefully, because if you try to build a society in terms of your government interest groups that is at stark disagreement with the society that you've built with your construction points, you're going to have a bad time. And then you're going to end up with like a giant party where everybody is radical and mad at you because your society isn't working. So be careful. Like I said, hopefully the arable land does get reworked here in 1.2, because I just don't think there's enough. I think this is going to be the fire hose and the teacup problem. Ideally, as most economies in Victoria 3, you want to build your construction sector up to hundreds, if not thousands of points. And as demonstrated, there's not enough capacity for you to actually like use those construction points productively when arable land is this small. And so, at least with the way the game is currently set up, although the problems of working with a landowner are obviated a little bit by how good Corn Laws is right now, I think generally speaking you still want to shy away from agricultural buildings, at least in the early game. It's just not very efficient right now. All right, that's Walker. I will link to this in the description, because this is a great article. Like, I think it misses out on the fact that not all land is created the same, and that missing out on a whole bunch of silk by losing out on land in East Asia is painful for people. It means that you can't just get your world silk supply by demanding a treaty port in Great Qing. But maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. All right, that's Walker. Take care.